What's up, everybody? This is Alex from Fireside Giants and Empire Sports Media Production. You're listening to the Fireside Giants podcast. If you're a diehard Giants fan, you've come to the right place. Daily episodes, interviews, draft content, and so much more. Make sure to drop a like and subscription below on YouTube. And don't forget to leave a comment. We love to engage with everybody. Now, for this Giants podcast episode, we are going to be looking at 10 different players from the Giants that are preparing to hit free agency. And if any of them are worthy of an extension or another deal. Of course, not many are, but there might be one or two that we have an opinion on that maybe they could stay on a cheaper contract. Before we dive into that, the Giants just hired Andre Patterson from the Minnesota Vikings. He was their co-defensive coordinator, assistant head coach, and position coach for the defensive line. He spent 10 seasons with the Vikings, extremely experienced, and a lot of people are saying this is a phenomenal hire. I was looking at some of the comments from Vikings fans, and they are very, very mad, saying that he was arguably the best coach on their staff. He was a big proponent in helping develop Everson Griffin, Daniel Hunter. So this is a lot of great talent that he is got directly correlated to in terms of development. So maybe he can unlock guys like Azeez Ojulari, unlock guys like Dexter Lawrence, maybe maximize Leonard Williams. We'll see in the coming, obviously, weeks and months and years. But I'm really excited about this hire. I think this is a tremendous grab for the Giants, another experienced coach to add to Wink Martindale's system and scheme and strategy. Tremendous. Like this coaching staff hire, one after another just gets better and better. So it's really exciting to see the Giants doing such a great job in luring really quality guys to the organization once again, which is what we've been waiting for, Anthony. But before we dive into the 10 free agents, I'll let you give your take on Andre Patterson. And how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. I really like this hiring of Andre Patterson. I'm a little surprised that Andre Patterson would take a position like this. I mean, he was an assistant head coach for the Minnesota Vikings, and now he's going all the way back down to just standard defensive line coach, unless there's going to be more details revealed. Maybe there is more to the job than just the defensive line coach, but what's being reported right now, the Giants just hired him as their defensive line coach. But I think this is a great hiring. Of course, we had Sean Spencer. He was a great defensive line coach. He left. Now they needed to replace him, and I think that this is probably the best way to replace him. Get a guy with all the experience in the world. He's been coaching football since 1983. He's been coaching in the NFL since 1997. He's worked on the defensive line from 1997 all the way till now, right? So, I mean, he's been doing 2 decades worth of offensive line or defensive line coaching rather, and he's had a lot of great players come out from underneath his tutelage. He's done a really phenomenal job. Of course, as you mentioned, Everson Griffin. The Vikings have had a great defensive line for a while. Vikings fans think this is one of the best coaches that they had on their staff, but now he's on our staff, and I love that. 61 years old, all the experience in the world, and just a really great track history, great career history, coaching the defensive line. I think this is actually a very, very good hiring by Brian Daboll and the Giants coaching staff.
Yep, I completely agree. And another one knocked out of the park. So hopefully they continue to get those great assistant coaches. The Giants have been doing a pretty solid job getting guys that they want. And people are leaving organizations. Like, I guess Mike Zimmer left the Vikings. They're kind of have some turnover over there. So Patterson might have said, I've spent 10 years here. I was really close with some of these guys. Time for me to move on to another opportunity and journey. So a good opportunity with the Giants and a new coaching staff, a chance to really develop a defense into what he wants alongside Wink Martindale and Rob Ryan. Of course, he's expected to join the staff as well. And Brian Cox, an aggressive son of a gun who almost took on the whole Cincinnati Bengals bench, as I mentioned in yesterday's episode. But let's jump into the 10 free agents the Giants have to deal with and potentially let walk. Maybe they retain. And the first one on the docket is Nate Solder. Now, by all means, and most people are going to agree, if you disagree, I don't know what you watched last season, but it wasn't the Giants. Nate Solder was awful. He was abysmal. He was not a quality right tackle by any means. In fact, he was one of the worst in the NFL. And a lot of people don't know this, but the Giants are paying him $4 million in a void year, right? So he's not on the team. They're paying him $4 million to literally be off the team. I would pay the guy more just to stay away from our team, just to stay away from our offensive line. He was that bad. But I'll say this. The Giants had to restructure his deal. They brought down his money so that they could get out of it and not have to give up too much after he opted out due to COVID. And that essentially moved his contract an entire year. The Giants did not want that. They did not want that entire salary hit to happen in 2022 and 2023. So they restructured his contract and they brought it down. They're paying him $4 million to not play for them so he can retire and make $4 million. Pretty nice deal for him. I wish I had the same job. But Nate Solder, Anthony, gone, right? There's no chance you're expecting him to return, because if he would, I don't think I could root for this team anymore.
I really hope that they give Nate Solder a 4-year extension worth 80 million. Get him out of here, bro. Get him gone. Get him gone. Get him gone yesterday. Get him gone. Cut him.
And there you have it. Get him gone. The next guy on the list, Austin Johnson, played defensive tackle for the Giants last year. He's about to turn 28 years old. Has a AAV of about $3 million on average. He was decent. I actually thought Austin Johnson played well at times. The thing is, I just don't think he's a starting level player. I think he's a backup. I think he's a reserve. And for that reason, I think the Giants let him go. They want to go in a different direction. Wink Martindale's going to want guys with familiarity. Austin Johnson came over from the Tennessee Titans. He was pretty solid there. He actually had a couple really solid games. He kind of was rotating in and out with Danny Shelton, who was utterly useless. And he's another guy on the free agent list. But Austin Johnson, I wouldn't, if they were extending him on a 1-year deal, I actually wouldn't hate it as a reserve guy, someone that could go in there and, just at least give some rest to those guys. He could start. He has the experience. I wouldn't hate if they retained him. I don't think they will, but he's not a player that I have any animosity toward.
Yeah, there's no animosity towards Austin Johnson like I have for Nate Solder. Obviously, I really didn't even want to speak about Nate Solder. I'm just so sick of watching him play football. But with Austin Johnson, I think he is a decent enough player to be re-signed. It's just going to come down to what does Wink Martindale feel about the player and his fit in the scheme. Because the scheme is similar to the last one. It's still a base 3-4, but it is a little bit different. Okay, there are differences. There's nuance in every single scheme. If Wink Martindale hits the film room, he says, Austin Johnson, I like what he brings to the table. He will fit in my scheme. Then go ahead, bring him in, re-sign him for a 1-year deal. It'll be cheap. Austin Johnson's no premier player at it by any means. But if Wink Martindale comes in and says, we need a different kind of defensive tackle, let's go for someone over here. Let's go with this free agent instead. That's fine as well. So I'm kind of indifferent on this one. I like Austin Johnson. At times, he showed up to play, and he played pretty well, but I don't think it's completely necessary. It's no priority for the Giants to go ahead and re-sign him. If they do, cool. If they don't, it's probably for a good reason.
Agreed. Moving on to the next player, Billy Price, the one Dave Gettleman sent a BJ Hill over to Cincinnati for. Billy Price was a bad center, just straight up bad center. He could not pass protect. He could not run block. He did not know the system. He was inconsistent. He basically was our only option after Nick Gates went down. So, Matt Skura ended up playing guard. Billy Price, I'm letting him walk, and I'm not even thinking twice about it, right? Unless they're going to keep him on like a veteran minimum deal as a reserve backup. That's the only way. But I just can't justify. I can't believe that we let BJ Hill, who's in a freaking Super Bowl right now and is an impact player in the Super Bowl. We gave up that kind of talent because the Giants couldn't maximize him. The scheme didn't really utilize those interior defensive linemen enough for him to get that much action. But Cincinnati Bengals do use him a lot. And I'm really happy that he has a better situation for him. But BJ Hill, man, I mean, Dave Gettleman is like the master at giving away value and getting nothing in return, right? He was forced, and I don't even want to go back to what he has to say. We're in a different era now. It feels like we're in a totally different stage in this team's development and growth. So I'm not even going to go back to that, bad times, the memories, the nightmares that I've had from Dave Gettleman saying the offensive line is better than you think it is. No more. We're not going to have any of that crap anymore. But looking at the Giants now, Billy Price, he's a Dave Gettleman mistake. You let him walk. You do not think twice about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm good off Billy Price, man. I don't need to see him play for the Giants any longer. I was never too excited about the acquisition, and he never gave me a reason to be excited once he was on the team. I hope that the Giants go ahead and find a really solid center in this year's draft. If they decide to trade down in the first round, take Tyler Linderbaum at some point in the middle of the first round this year, I'd be over the moon. I think that he's going to be a premier center in this league. But of course, there's also mid-round options that the Giants can and probably will and definitely should take a look at going into this year's draft. I think that's where they'll find their center unless Nick Gates is able to come back healthy. But that was a pretty significant injury. I think it's going to be a while. I think at some point this season he will be healthy. I just don't think it's going to be by the start of the season, which is why the Giants definitely need to go ahead and find a new center.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you go in there. If you can get Tyler Linderbaum, man, holy crap. If we were able to trade back from 7 to like 12, 13, there's a chance Tyler Linderbaum could still be there. This pass rush class is incredibly deep. If the Giants traded back, got another second round pick, you can use one of those second round picks on a pass rusher and maybe go offensive lineman in the first round. There's a lot of different ways you could go. You can maybe not go with Tyler Linderbaum. Maybe you go with Kyle Hamilton, maybe you do something else. There's so many different options, but Tyler Linderbaum, obviously best center in the draft class. They don't usually go in the top 10, so I think he'll be there in the 10 to 15 range. But he's that good. He's athletic. He gets to the second level incredibly fast, super, super agile and quick. And he's powerful too. He's going to fit any scheme that you put him in the NFL, which is really exciting about him. Very amendable and adaptable. If we landed Tyler Linderbaum, it would definitely give us a nice boost in the offensive line. That's for sure. But I do expect us still to go for an offensive tackle with the 5th overall pick. But going on to the next name on this list, let's take a look. Evan Ingram, one of the most polarizing Giant players in recent memory. Evan Ingram has had his moments of, wow, how did he do that? And then saying, how did you drop that pass and miss the playoffs for us? It's just, he is so polarizing. I don't really think that there's any way the Giants keep him on this team. I think he might get a decent contract elsewhere and be a pretty good player on a different club.
Yeah, I could totally see that happening. Sometimes that's all players need is just a change of scenery. The drops have been a real issue his entire career here with the Giants, and it's really unfortunate to say. Had high hopes for him during his rookie season, second year as well, but just hasn't panned out. And unfortunately, I think the Giants know what they got to do. It's probably time to just let him go and let him find a new change of scenery to make a better name for himself.
I agree. I think he just needs to change the scenery. It's been just a tough ride in New York for most of these players. Just the coaching staff turnover, the play callers, it just doesn't stop with the negative, factors. But moving on to the next player, Jabril Peppers. Jabril Peppers, dude, I think would actually be an awesome player in Wink Martindale's system. I think that he is super athletic. He's fast. He's quick. What we've seen him do to some of these pass rushers as a pass rusher from the safety position. Remember, like last year, he bulldozed, or 2020 bulldozed Chris Carson right into Russell Wilson's lap. He sacked him. He sacked Sam Darnold. He did a front flip over a guy and sacked Darnold last in the game that ended up tearing his ACL. He was tremendous, right? Jabril Peppers has had his moments to shine, but I just don't think Patrick Graham favored him enough. But as Wink Martindale's system is a very blitz-heavy scheme. That term money backer that James Betcher used back in the day with the Cardinals and when he brought it over to the Giants, I think that, Jabril Peppers would fit that money backer kind of role really nicely. And the thing about Jabril Peppers is that he's too light to be a linebacker, right? You look at Blake Martinez. He's about 20 pounds heavier and 3 inches taller than Jabril Peppers. If you look over to the Baltimore Ravens, Patrick Queen, who they drafted 2 years ago or last year, Patrick Queen is about the same height as Jabril Peppers, but he's also 20 pounds heavier. So Peppers it has to play that strong safety, like money backer role. He can't play middle linebacker. He's just not big enough in the run game. But with that being said, you have him in that money back role, in a coverage role. They play a lot of man coverage. Hopefully he gets better against tight ends. That's kind of the big question is, can he cover tight ends? He's had some really bad struggles with that in the past. But use him as a blitzer, man. He can blitz. He can be that third down guy, or second down guy, get into third and long, do creative things with him. I think Jabril Peppers would be a great player in Martindale's scheme. So honestly, coming off an ACL tear, maybe they give him a 1-year, $2 million deal. We can probably afford that, but I think I would consider retaining Jabril Peppers on a 1-year deal just because he's coming off injury. He's going to have to prove it anyway. Anthony, what do you think about that concept of maybe keeping Jabril Peppers and letting him, test out Martindale's scheme for a season?
Yeah, so if there's anybody on the roster right now that fits Wink Martindale's defensive scheme, it's probably Jabril Peppers. He probably fits it almost perfectly because not only is he, good safety coverage-wise, but he's a phenomenal pass rusher from the safety position. And we know Wink Martindale loves to dial up some really creative, scheme-together blitz packages. And we know that the safeties get involved, the cornerbacks get involved, edge rushers, linebackers, everyone gets involved with the blitzing in this defense. And being that Jabril Peppers got a few sacks in 2020, he was really productive as a pass rusher from the safety position. I would love to see him play in this defensive scheme. I think that Wink Martindale would absolutely get the most out of Jabril Peppers. I want to see him return, but I don't think he will return. I don't think the Giants plan on re-signing him because I think you just mentioned a 1-year, $2 million deal. Unfortunately, safeties, that market has gone up. The safety market has really inflated in recent years. Ever since the signing from Landon Collins over to the Washington football team, Washington Commanders now actually, he got that monster deal. And ever since then, the average dollar amount for safeties per year has gone up because it kind of reset the market. So for Jabril Peppers, I understand he's coming off of the injury and everything. I still think he's going to get a good chunk of change because he did have a really good 2020 season and he has that natural talent, that raw ability, athleticism that teams are going to look at and say, I want this guy. I think I can build him into a special player. There's going to be a couple teams that think that way. If the Giants think that way, great. I hope they do because I want to see him resign. But if they don't necessarily see it that way, another team will. They'll offer more money, and that'll be that. Because I just don't think the Giants are really putting a huge priority on Jabril Peppers and extending him. But man, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Wink Martindale steps in and says, actually, this guy is perfect for my scheme. Joe Schoen, please re-sign this man, and then he'll get re-signed. I really hope to see that happen. Just not sure that it will.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. But ultimately, I still think Jabril Peppers could be a great player. He just kind of like wasn't given the chance early on last season. I don't think he's a great man coverage guy. Maybe he's better in zone. He's physical. Maybe Patrick Graham didn't want to blitz enough. I just don't think that they were willing to build a system where Jabril Peppers featured as a prominent playmaker on defense. I think that's kind of why he got pushed to the side a little bit, but he's still a great player. I think he could be really good in a scheme that really maximizes his athleticism. And I think that Wink Martindale's blitz heavy scheme would fit his style. He's very aggressive and fast. So I think that would be ideal for him. Moving on to the next player, Will Hernandez. Will Hernandez, another polarizing guy, 26 years old. He's been up and down his entire career. He took over for Kevin Zeitler at right guard this past season. He really struggled in the second half of the year. I think lack of consistency. I think the rotation of Matt Pert, Corey Cunningham, and Nate Solder really, really hurt him. I think Nick Gates dropping out of the lineup with the leg fracture really hurt his continuity. I still think Will Hernandez could be an average to slightly above average player, just probably not with the Giants. They're just not ready for that, for him to be a good player. I think he goes elsewhere. He'll probably be super cheap. I think the Giants, want to restart. Joe Schoen is going to want to get his own players. He's going to want his own offensive lineman. Will Hernandez probably goes on to sign a 2-3 year deal with another team, maybe averaging $2-3 million per season, and competes for a starting gig. But I just don't think it's going to be with the Giants. I still think he has his best football ahead of him, but he needs a team that's already settled, that's already situated. He can go to a team like Cleveland or a team like, I don't know, I'm just making up names now, Kansas City or even the Bengals, and he would be pretty decent, I think. But I just don't think with the Giants, he just needs to change his scenery like a lot of these guys. So, Anthony, what are you thinking about Will Hernandez?
Yeah, I'm good to let Will Hernandez go. I had really high expectations for him going into this season. He was a player that in his rookie year looked really, really good. He looked like a really solid contributor to the Giants offensive line, but just hasn't panned out since then. He's regressed pretty much every single year. And at this point, I don't think he's going to turn it around, at least not in New York. I agree with you. He might be able to turn himself into a decent player with a change of scenery. But right now, with the New York Giants, it's just time to go in a different direction, in my opinion. It's time to find a new offensive lineman. It's a shame to say he was a second-round pick, 2018, had a lot of high hopes, but it just didn't pan out. And unfortunately, that's been the case for a lot of these Dave Gettleman draft picks that we've mentioned continuously on this podcast. So personally, ready to see Will Hernandez go and just allow the Giants to completely rebuild this offensive line around Andrew Thomas.
Yep, absolutely. Andrew Thomas is the cornerstone piece there, so you got to keep building around him. The next player on the list, Mike Glennon. Easy answer, get the hell off our team. He's gone. See ya. We already brought in, I guess, Davis Webb, who actually, interestingly enough, Anthony, Davis Webb was actually going to be transitioning into assistant QB coach with Buffalo, and they signed him to a futures deal. So maybe the Giants want to do something similar with Davis Webb. Who knows? But I was really interested to hear that. And, thinking about the Giants backups, go sign Mitch Trubisky, man. He's a pretty competent backup, and at least he has starting experience. Mike Glennon was one of the worst backups I've ever seen. The guy, he could see over the offensive line because his neck was as long as a pole, but hell, he was so bad. The guy could not throw. He was inaccurate. His arm was like a dead cat. It just flailed on the ground. Couldn't throw the ball over 30 yards accurately. It was just a disaster. I really hope that the Giants find a competent backup like a Marcus Mariota. He'll be a little bit more pricey. But Daniel Jones, the injury history, he's had a couple of issues here and there. They need some insurance. They need a guy who can come in and actually win a game. And ultimately, the Eagles went out and got Gardner Minshew for a 6th round pick. Maybe the Giants try to do something like that. I still think Mitch Trubisky knows the scheme that Brian Daboll wants to run. He knows his system. So I would definitely expect them to be interested in Mitch Trubisky this offseason. But we will, if any rumors pop up, we'll cover that extensively and take a look at Trubisky and what he offers, Anthony. But what are you thinking about Mike Glennon and maybe potential, replacement at reserve quarterback that you might like?
Yeah, Mike Glennon can go. Unfortunately, he didn't look too good last year. I think most Giants fans agree about that. It's probably good to let him go and find a younger quarterback as the backup. someone that's more similar to the starter's playing style. Daniel Jones plays the game one way. Mike Glennon plays the game a completely different way. So I don't know what the Giants were thinking, signing Mike Glennon to step in there, and then they basically had to take out a third of the plays in their playbook for him. So that was stupid. So hopefully going forward, the Giants go ahead. They get a quarterback, the starting quarterback, assuming it's Daniel Jones, and then the backup has a similar playing style so that they don't have to change the playbook in case Daniel Jones gets injured again. So I like Mitch Trubisky a lot. You just mentioned him. I think that would be really smart because he has experience in Brian Daboll's system, his playoff starting experience. He was the MVP. He's been to a Pro Bowl. He's gotten, some decent moments in his career, right? There are some moments in Mitchell Trubisky's career that are more impressive than most quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, overall, he is a first-round bust. He's not the guy. Career backup, probably, and probably a good one at that. So I would really like Trubisky. And, if any other names come to mind, we'll talk about it on this podcast. But for sure, Mike Glennon, safe to say he's not going to be extended, and that Brian Daboll will look elsewhere for the backup quarterback position.
Yeah, I agree. You got to look elsewhere. No way we're going backward in this scenario. But let's take a look at the next player, Danny Shelton. Danny Shelton, also a gunner, defensive tackle, 28 years old. He was just abysmal last year. Could not stop the run. Dude is huge. Dude is like a car. He's like a Subaru Impreza right in the middle of your defensive line. But the thing about Subaru Imprezas is that sometimes they don't move. Sometimes they don't work. I've had a Subaru Impreza. The thing broke down all the time. Normally, Subarus are pretty reliable cars, but ultimately, not this time around. And Danny Shelton was just, he just didn't move, right? Like he was not fast. He's just a huge human being who clogs up holes, A gaps and B gaps really, but he just couldn't get it done, man. He just wasn't physical enough, wasn't athletic enough. I think he kind of lost a step. Unfortunately, Danny Shelton definitely gone. I'll pair him together with Elijah Penny. I actually really like Elijah Penny. I think he served a pretty good purpose. He came in here as a running back and a fullback, and whatever he was asked, he did pretty well. I would not be surprised if Elijah Penny stayed with the team. People really like him over there, so I think that Penny, maybe on a 1 year, $1 million deal, is enough to retain him at 28 years old. Anthony, what are you thinking about Shelton and Penny?
Yeah, Danny Shelton can go. I liked that signing when we made it because I thought, Shelton's had a really good career history. He's had a lot of success with multiple teams, just being that average guy that you pay him to be. But unfortunately, he wasn't even average this year. He seemed pretty bad at times. Maybe he truly has lost a step. Maybe he really is on the back nine of his career. So Danny Shelton, I feel like the Giants, they can do better. They can find someone better in that position. Plus, you take a look at what Wink Martindale likes to do on defense. I'm not sure if Danny Shelton, that slow man, is like really a fit for this high speed defense that Wink Martindale likes to run. I don't think he fits well. And then with Elijah Penny, yes, I agree with you. Elijah Penny is a good player. He does everything he's asked, and he does it well. He's at least average at everything he does. And I like that. I think he's actually a really good fullback. But I could see a scenario where the Giants don't re-sign Elijah Penny, and here's why. The system that Brian Daboll runs does not really use fullbacks. They love to spread the ball out. They love spread offenses. That's a major thing. You really got to take into consideration the scheme when you talk about these players that the Giants could or could not re-sign. Now, with Elijah Penny, yes, if this is Jason Garrett's offense, of course, Elijah Penny's got to be there because we've got fullbacks on the field more frequently than most other teams in the NFL, so we need a good fullback. The Bills' offense did not need a good fullback. Like, can you name the Bills' fullback? No. I mean, sure, you probably can't name most of the fullbacks in the NFL anyway, but they use a lot of zero running back sets as well, like empty backfields. Quarterback just stands in the backfield alone. They do that a whole lot in Buffalo, or at least they did with Brian Daboll. I expect it to continue with Ken Dorsey, but Brian Daboll bringing that offensive scheme over here to the New York Giants, I expect to see a lot of 10 and 11 personnel, meaning no fullbacks, just one running back or zero running backs on the field, and a whole bunch of receivers and tight ends spread out across the line of scrimmage. That's what you're going to see with this offense. That's what I wanted to see with this offense. That's why I was so excited about the prospect of Brian Daboll, and that's why he was my number one head coaching candidate, because I love the spread offense. I love that. I think it's the future of the NFL. All of the most successful offenses in the NFL spread it out. They don't really place a heavy emphasis on a fullback or a heavy backfield, anything like that. In fact, if you take a look at what the Bills do, their pass run split, it's like almost 70 to 30, right? It's like 67 to 33 or something like that. I mean, Brian Daboll was running the football or passing the football at an extremely high rate. The running game just did not matter as much to the Bills this past year because it just was not the way that they were winning. They win through throwing the football, spreading it out, and you don't need a fullback to do that. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants went into the season with a really low-level fullback on the roster, knowing that he'd barely be used. And I also wouldn't be surprised if they go into the season without a fullback on their roster and just brought a tight end into the backfield on the rare occasions that they actually do use a fullback.
Yeah, I know that definitely makes sense. I mean, look what the San Francisco 49ers do. They have Kyle Juszczyk, but they also bring around Trent Williams to act as kind of that lead blocker at times too. So you can do unique things. But yeah, I do agree with you. I think that you should be able to kind of multi-purpose players, especially when you're trying to save money or you're trying to save roster spots for guys. Maybe bring a tight end if you have your backup tight end serve as that fullback role. Just be that extra big blocker. Definitely somebody to consider. But next guy on the list is really an interesting one. This is the last one that we actually have to talk about, and it is Lorenzo Carter. Lorenzo Carter actually was pretty damn good in the second half of last year. I thought that he had a pretty solid season. It takes a while to get over Achilles injuries, and wasn't until the second half of the year that he really looked fully healthy. He finished the season with 5 sacks, 50 combined tackles, which is a career high. 6 tackles for a loss and 8 QB hits over 14 games. He also had 5 passes defended and 2 forced fumbles. I would be interested to see how much he is going to earn this in a new contract. I would be interested to see if maybe a guy like we just hired, Andre Patterson, who really was a great proponent in helping Everson Griffin, Danielle Hunter maximize their talents. Maybe he's a guy that you could depend on to elevate Lorenzo Carter. Maybe that's something. There's something there. And with that being said, you also have Brian Cox, who's a former linebacker. So maybe he helps in the outside linebacker grouping too. It's really interesting. The Giants have a pretty decent coaching staff now, at least on paper. We'll see how they actually do when things get rolling. But Lorenzo Carter looked good the second half of the year. The contract that I would offer him, 2 years, $6 million. That's I think the most I would offer Lorenzo Carter. I think that's reasonable. I think that's pretty priced nicely for what he has to offer at this point. $3 million for his services. I think he's going to have 5+ sacks next year with whatever team he goes to if he's a starter. I think he looked good in the second half of the season. He looks pretty solid in the run game too, Anthony. What are you thinking about Lorenzo Carter? Is he a guy that you consider retaining?
I would definitely consider retaining Lorenzo Carter on kind of a one-year prove-it type deal because that first half of the season was just so bad. He just looked like he would never be the same player. And then the final, what was it, 4 or 5 games of the year, just turns it on, becomes really good all of a sudden. You're like, oh, okay, this is what we were hoping to get the entire season. Maybe the injury just held him back a little longer than anticipated. So I would like to see him retain one-year prove-it deal. Like I said, you got to think about the scheme. Wink Martindale really likes fast edge rushers, likes fast players, and Lorenzo Carter is very athletic. He could fit into the scheme and hopefully do a really good job. So I'd like to see him get at least 1 year under Wink Martindale's coaching, and maybe he could turn it around and prove to be a really good player. So a 1-year prove-it deal would probably be pretty cheap, in my opinion. I would assume that at least. So I would like to see Lorenzo Carter come back for just at least one more season, see how he does, and then reevaluate in 2023.
Yep, I agree with that testament as well. But guys, that's the 10 free agents the Giants have to consider retaining or letting go. So essentially extending or exile. And there's a couple there that might be worthy of considering. As we mentioned, I'd love to hear your opinion in the YouTube comments below, whether you think that Lorenzo Carter, should be getting maybe Will Hernandez, even Evan Ingram, maybe some guys like him, Jamal Peppers, as I mentioned, I think would be a good fit in Wink Martindale's system. But I'd love to hear your opinions and thoughts on those players that we did mention. Make sure to like and subscribe as always on the YouTube channel, and please leave a 5-star review if you are so willing on Spotify and Apple. As always, much love, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants episode.